Welcome to the Bringing the Human Back to Human Resources podcast, the podcast all about the delicate balance between people and business, and quite literally reconnecting the two. My name is Tracy Rubin, and I've spent nearly my entire professional career in HR. Join me as I share stories, opinions, and words of advice with you each week. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here for another week. You know what to do. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you are listening or watching this podcast. This week's episode is with Sammy Courtright. I have to tell you, I first met Sammy, probably through the podcast, I think. I can't exactly remember how, but when I joined Sammy for a panel discussion that she was hosting through her company on employee and employer recognition, we just hit it off. And that wasn't the first time we met. We, of course, connected before that. But I think, if there's anything that is true, it's that she really brings a fresh perspective, and I think you're really going to enjoy this episode. So let me tell you a little bit about Sammy. Hailing from Australia, Sammy Courtright is the co-founder and chief brand officer of TenSpot, an all-in-one platform that helps companies connect, engage, and manage remote and on-site employees. After finding it frustrating to stay healthy in a typical 9-to-5 environment, Sammy and her co-founder, Jonathan Cohn, teamed up in 2014 to create FitSpot, whose mission was to deliver wellness where employees needed it the most, at work. Renamed TenSpot in 2020, the company not only rebranded to expand beyond wellness, but now offers a centralized solution for companies to increase their productivity, boost retention, and build a strong culture. When COVID hit, Sammy learned that customers were facing a similar issue. How do we ensure employees feel like they work for the same company when they're not in the same place? Through research, she discovered that leadership was struggling to manage distributed teams. This led to TenSpot's expansion to the workforce engagement platform it is today. With a BA in Fine Arts from the University of Miami, Sammy is a certified Pilates instructor who brings a blend of grit and imagination to the zillions of tasks that confront every startup. While she wears many hats, Sammy's passion for building culture has created an atmosphere at TenSpot dedicated to positive thinking and collaboration. So without further ado, let's welcome Sammy to the podcast. I think you're going to love this discussion. Sammy, welcome to the podcast. You're officially here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be having this conversation with you today. I feel like it's such a timely discussion, and it's a question around, employee engagement that everyone is talking about at the moment. So thanks for having me.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I'm super excited for this conversation. And I alluded to this in the intro that you and I have had a chance already to kind of do something like this on your platform with your company and how much fun that was. And I think that everyone is in this employee engagement bubble, including myself, actually being a director of employee engagement. It's something I'm constantly thinking about, like, how the heck do we solve for these problems? And I get these questions all the time, like, where do we even start? And I'm sure this comes up a lot with you that it's very complex. You're not just going to solve engagement with one focus, and it's often, juggling a million things at once. But first of all, I know that this is not only your passion, but it's also your business and your career. But where does someone start? Like when you speak with your customers, or when you even started TenSpot, for example, how did you kind of theorize where employee engagement comes from and where it starts?
Sure. So we really did a lot of discovery at the beginning stages of TenSpot to better understand what were our customers facing, to your point. And after doing hundreds of interviews, we kept hearing this sentiment. Now, I want to be very clear that these conversations were happening at the beginning of the pandemic. I'm talking March, April 2020. So the sentiment that we were hearing was, how do I get people to feel like they work for the same company when they're no longer in the same space? And that really triggered TenSpot's, kind of inception around employee engagement and connecting teams, regardless of where teams were located. But when customers come to us and they're like, we don't even know where to get started, we think we have a problem with employee engagement, or we think that there are areas to improve with employee engagement, but what does that even mean? And what could we even do to gauge that? And something that we found really beneficial is just sending out an anonymous survey. It takes like 2 minutes for people to complete. And there are questions like, hey, do you feel connected to your team? Do you feel connected to the work that you're doing? When was the last time you kind of got recognition for your job? Or when was the last time you felt really engaged at work? Was it around a project? And these are, multiple choice. The last time you guys all got together in person. It's a really great pulse check, and we get all of those results. And regardless if you end up working with TenSpot or not, we give you access to all of these results because it's just more informative and helps guide the conversations moving forward with the customers. And we learn so much about your team. We better understand what engagement means to different people, because to some folks, engaging could be, hey, I sent a meme on Slack to, kind of respond to the trivia question of the day or to the icebreaker question of the day. I got on the phone and had a quick video call with someone to wish them a happy birthday. Engagement means so many different things to different individuals, and there's really no one size fits all. But a survey, in my opinion at least, and from what I've seen with our customers, helps set the groundwork. What are we working with? Who feels what about the company? And how can we ensure that we're delivering an experience or implementing software, in the case of working with TenSpot, that really does hit on some of these pain points that we're recognizing, or some things that we're already doing really well? How do we enhance that?
Super interesting. One of the things that makes me think about is the way that culture is built and the way that culture can be destroyed. And I talk to leaders a lot about this on the podcast and my own job, that, it takes actually a lot of work to build a culture, but it takes a lot more work to maintain it. Because as you're building an organization, whether you're a startup or you're, a Fortune 500 business, you're constantly growing and adding to your business. And each person that you bring on, or each person that you forget about, that could really impact negatively the culture. And obviously I want to focus on the positive too, that you can also elevate the culture and add value with each new hire or each new promotion. But from your perspective, and I know we'll get into some of the survey results that you've run, back in 2021, but what are your thoughts on this, building and then the challenge of maintaining culture? Where does it all go wrong? And where do leaders, invest their priorities in a way that will always be an investment? Like, where can they spend time that will never be a waste of time or a waste of resources?
Mm. Okay, so I want to start with the latter half of that just because it's top of mind and I've been thinking about this a ton. Where can leaders invest their resources or time to ensure that culture is being maintained or reiterated or reinforced? All of those wonderful words. We notice that leaders that really communicate, and I know this isn't like a money thing, if people can communicate or they invest in tools that help them more effectively communicate. We have found that communication, especially with distributed teams, when I'm talking about distributed teams, I mean folks that are either physically in an office or working remotely or a combination of both, this is where they're really seeing a lot of reward. It's around the communication, the clear communication, reminding people of what they're here to do, the purpose behind their work, and how their work really contributes to the greater mission or vision of the company. There's a reason why people join companies in the first place. Of course, we can sit here and say, yeah, it's the pay, like that's the single most important thing. And for some individuals, that it might be, and that's perfectly fine. However, based on a lot of the survey data that we're going to reference in a minute, there's many other factors that come into that decision-making process. And one of those factors is, do I feel connected to this business? Am I excited by what we are working on? Am I excited about the team that I'm going to be either building or working with? And we find that if you reiterate that quite consistently, like, hey, this is what we're here to do, this is what we're building, this is the why, versus just making it very task-oriented with employees and what they need to get done, we found that has really reinforced the culture of doing something together and accomplishing something together that makes people feel really committed to what they're doing. And I will give a prime example because I am guilty of this, especially at the beginning of the pandemic. There was so much taking place personally, like as in people were just trying to literally survive. And
Right.
people were thinking about their personal health and safety, their families' health and safety, their kids that weren't going to school that now had to be homeschooled, the elderly. There's so many different factors taking place. And I think that's when employees recognized, whoa, I now have to bring my whole self to work. There is no longer work Sammy, and there's no longer like home, family, friend, daughter, wife Sammy. Those things are all happening and coming together at once. And my employer, my company, has to be okay with that. And I will admit, at the beginning of the pandemic, I would get on the phone and be like, what are we doing? Run me through the tasks that you have to accomplish today. And then that video call would be over and done with. And I would be like, okay, moving on to the next thing. I stopped asking questions. I stopped
Mm,
checking in with the team. And I realized, what we were all going through wasn't just an individual experience. This was very much a global experience. So I remember poignantly this one meeting where things weren't really kicking off. It was a brainstorming session. People were feeling a little blocked, or it's really hard to read people on Zoom as well.
mm-hmm.
And I just said, let's just stop the conversation. How's everyone really doing? And I remember people being like, it sucks right
Yeah.
now. And there was just an honest
Yeah.
conversation and honest communication. And from that moment on, I really tried to take that as an opportunity I could be communicating more effectively, because we had created such a wonderful, collaborative and supportive and really fun culture when we were all in office. And I was doing the complete opposite when we had moved virtual. I wasn't allowing that communication to kind of happen. I was stunting that because I was trying to just get the task ahead, trying to survive, trying to,
Right.
keep our business alive, trying to just, navigate this really difficult time. And so I noticed that thread with me. And when I started communicating that to a lot of our customers and leaders that we work with, they were like, I get that. I feel like we haven't really been doing as good of a job around that communication. I don't think we've really reiterated what our company values are and why those values are still relevant, even if we're all dispersed. And if they're no longer relevant, maybe it's time to revisit those values. So, from a cultural perspective, and a very long way of answering your question, I find that communication is really key, and then reiterating that continuously. And as people join in, allow them to contribute to that versus saying, fit to our form. These are our
Mm.
values. Of course, you have to, resonate with them. It has to click with you. You have to be excited by them, the mission and the vision as well. But what are you bringing to the table? Everyone has the responsibility to contribute to our company's culture. How are you going to contribute that? What role do you want to play?
I love that. This theme on the whole person, I talk about that a lot.
Mm,
Um, that is, I mean, it's really something that I'm. It's almost like if I could just pull all of the leaders, HR, non-HR, all the leaders into one room and say, "Are you thinking about your people, or are you thinking about them as people and then employees when they're at work?" And
of
because
course.
if it's disjointed, you're not going to really figure out how to appeal to that whole person. And so I love that you referenced that. And then you also kind of talked about psychological safety. And this is where I want to bring in the survey that you did. And just to give everyone a background on the survey with the methodology, I'm going to read here just so that everyone is clear that TenSpot conducted its company culture, behavior, and social issues in today's workplace survey with 2,000 people who are currently employed or were currently employed between April 19th and April 20th in 2021, and the margin of error is plus or minus 2.08%. So, 2,000 people, that's a pretty far reaching survey. I mean, it's great that you found 2,000 people to really share their insights with you. It's not so easy to do that. And one of the results that I really want to reference here is really about the psychological and emotional safety. So it's written here that overall 76% of respondents reported that the company they work for is a psychologically and emotionally safe place to work for all employees, and that 87% of people feel like they have at least one colleague at work who cares about them as a person, which I was so excited to see. So tell me, I guess, keeping this underpinning of the psychological safety, what were your thoughts when you saw some of these survey results? And there are obviously some areas of improvement here, especially in DE&I, belonging, connectedness, and things like that. That people are saying they expect more from their employers. But what were your initial thoughts after seeing these survey results? Most of us have probably received a corporate gift or swag in the past, but how many of those did you actually end up keeping? If you're like me, probably not that many, which is why you need to check out swag.com for your company. It is the best place to buy custom gifts and swag that people actually want to keep. And let me tell you, I've actually received swag.com swag, not only because of the podcast, but also in my full-time job. And it's an amazing experience to, one, receive a super quickly delivered box of fun. That's what I call them, box of fun. That's how I described it, at least to my husband. I'm like, this is a box of fun. Thank you. Please, it's mine. Don't touch. But opening it, it's a personalized experience. At my full-time job, we use swag.com, and it's no coincidence that now swag.com is a sponsor for this episode, because it works. And when I received a swag box from my current company, I got everything from a water bottle to a hat, and it was all customized for our company. When swag.com sent me a box from swag.com for this podcast, though, it was all swag.com stuff. And let me tell you, it was so awesome to receive a pen and another water bottle and some stickers, and I just love it. And I know that you and your company would love it too, because when you can customize something that actually, looks the part, feels the part, your employees enjoy it, because again, even the box is customized. I mean, we're talking full end-to-end swag. It makes it easy to reward and recognize your employees. And the other thing that's really cool about swag.com is that they can house all of the merchandise for you. So if you're a remote employer, you don't even have to worry about how you're going to get swag to people, and you don't even have to worry about storing that swag. So swag.com can keep everything in-house for you. And swag.com carries premium brands like the North Face, Yeti, Nike, and more. And it's all, again, customizable with your company's logo or artwork. You can even create custom swag boxes full of great branded items like I just shared with you, all delivered in a fully unique box, aka what I call the fun box. With swag.com, you can store your swag at their warehouse and ship to individual addresses, or send in bulk to a single location. And you can easily manage it from their free-to-use online portal, which, let me tell you, is super awesome, intuitive, easy to use. Go to swag.com today for the perfect swag and custom gifts for your company. Right now, I actually have a special offer to help you get started, which would be 10% off of your order, but only when you go to swag.com/humanhr and enter the promo code humanhr10. So remember, for 10% off, you go to swag.com/humanhr and use promo code humanhr10. I'll put everything in the show notes to make it super easy for you, but head to swag.com now.
Well, I love that you mentioned the 87% stat first, because you forget, and I forget this sometimes as well, that generationally, Gen Zers are going to work expecting or relying on work at times to be that social interaction for the day, to be that opportunity to make friends, to be that opportunity to have, your co-working wives and husbands, all of those things that I kind of forgot about. I thought, I had to put myself in their shoes. You've just graduated college, and then you start your first job potentially fully remotely in a global pandemic where you're working from your apartment, and there is still that response, that high response, that there is someone at work that they've really connected with, that they feel like they have, camaraderie. And that did make me incredibly happy. And it reminded me also very quickly that socialization is so important in the workplace. And if we're just focusing on work at work, we're missing kind of that whole picture and that whole opportunity for employees to form friendships. Look, there's stats out there that support, when you have friends at work, largely you stay because you feel more connected to the work that you're doing. You don't want to let them down. And you also form friendships. It makes it a little bit more difficult to just, get up and leave.
Totally. I think about how I started my career after college, which was back in 2014. And someone that I met, actually a lot of the people that I met in that first job, I'm still friends with today. One person in particular I'm super close with. And I have thought about this a little bit, especially when reading this survey result that it must be so difficult to graduate college being fully like overwhelmed with socialization. Obviously, to me, best part of college was the socializing. I loved it. Hello, right? And then you are potentially like working out of your parents' basement or your childhood home, or maybe you moved out, or maybe you have a roommate, maybe you like them, and now you're like almost completely isolated. And so this has come up interestingly in other surveys that Gen Z is torn. They want to go back
Mm.
to the office, but they also want the flexibility of being remote. And that flexibility can come in so many different ways. But and we could talk about that on a different episode for like over an hour, I'm sure, about the beauty of flexibility. But I never, I honestly didn't really think enough about the population that was entering the workforce during a pandemic
You and I'm telling you, you never did, because everyone was focused on, themselves and how they're going
themselves.
to navigate this. But you're so right. And I started thinking about all of the things that you learn just by naturally being in an office, like office etiquette.
Yeah.
You learn how to, when you're like kind of looking over your colleague's shoulder when they're sending off an email, oh, they CC everyone in that. I'm going to go ahead and CC
Yeah.
it. You know what I mean? You just start
Yeah.
learning office etiquette. And I'm like, how the heck are you learning that now? When you can't
Yeah.
just look over someone's shoulder, you can't just tap someone and be like, hey, I'm about to send this off. Could you roll your eyes over it before I send it? Now it's like, oh, you got to Slack it to them or email it to them, ahead of
Totally.
time. You have to schedule time on their calendar to get the 5 minutes for them to roll their eyes over. That spontaneity of like learning on the fly doesn't really exist. It's a little bit more scheduled if you do want to make it happen. And you're totally right. There's just so many different elements that people forget about that took place in an office environment that is impacting how Gen Z and other and future generations enter the workforce and learn and
Yeah.
professional development.
Yeah. I know. I think about Gen Z. We're thinking about you. I mean, it's like it's hard. It's a really complex challenge because you have, multiple generations in the workforce. Obviously, I think it's Gen X that, or yeah, it's probably Gen X that's like moving their way out of the workforce, maybe more so the baby boomers, but really Gen Z is going to be the large majority probably, unless the millennials are still kind of gatekeeping the majority of the population in the workforce. Hey, representation.
Yeah.
But I think that Gen Z has had a huge impact actually on the way that businesses have changed and adapted, especially because of this flexibility piece, but also because of the social and political initiatives. And so I would be remiss not to mention these 2 points here. So I'm just going to read again that one of the bullet points in the survey says that nearly half, so about 47% of all respondents, have not been offered or have not participated in DE&I training at their company, which is obviously a huge miss. And then there's another paragraph here that says, while politicians have recently criticized companies for getting involved in politics, 49% of the survey responses reflected company involvement in or support of 5 key socio-political issues, and that 76% of respondents say they know what their company stands for when it comes to company culture and social issues. So I wanted to kind of juxtapose these things because I think there's definitely a lot of involvement with obviously DEI, social political issues, and wanting to feel represented and connected to the bigger picture while at work. And then I also read and hear from people that they don't really want as much of that because they have their own
Of
beliefs
course.
and they don't want their beliefs challenged. So what are your takes on this for, companies having this balancing act of being expected to speak out on important topics and then also not wanting to isolate certain people who, especially if only 47% of people, or I should say, if 47% of people, at least in this poll, have not received the training, it's going to be hard to actually expect them to be able to understand what position you're taking, whether you take one or not. I mean, the training is so much a part of that piece.
Absolutely. And there's a follow-up question that I wish that we asked, always
Yeah.
in retrospect, about these types of about when we were going down kind of this rabbit hole. And what I was really interested in is, while you have not received this specific training formally at work, do you feel, because of the environment that you were exposed to in high school, college, how you grew, like kind of grew up and were immersed in
Right.
it, was that already kind of part of your learning, and what's happening at work would just reiterate that? I think that our Gen Z and younger generations are growing up with a little bit more exposure than even we had as
Yeah.
millennials to these types of things. So that was like a follow-up question that I wanted to kind of ask, and I think that's really interesting to understand.
Yeah.
However, compartmentalize that discussion and talk about what we're discussing. Yes, it is a slippery slope, and I completely and utterly empathize with both the employee and the company employers in this situation, because as an employer, when it comes to social issues, you are not only thinking about, could I potentially alienate our team, like the
Right.
employees at our company, but there's customers, there's shareholders, there's the general public, there's all these other individuals that you have to think about. And it's really complicated to have a stance on a particular issue, knowing that it could potentially alienate individuals. So I understand why companies are thinking, well, where do we want to take a stance on that? And then on the flip side, the employees are thinking, well, hang on a second, I have my own views.
Right.
That's personal, and I want to leave that, to my extracurricular activities. I can, get involved with whatever organizations that I want to get involved with on my own time. I don't necessarily need my company, one, knowing it, or two,
Right.
getting involved on their end. And then the other side of that is that actually I do want them to get involved, and I do want them to have a really strong point of view on issues. I think I'm uncertain if I've really come across a company that has found like that perfect balance, or appeasing everyone, which you can. Like
No.
you really
Yeah.
can. It's a lose lose or a win win, depending on
Yeah.
how you look at it. In many of these situations, however, I have seen some companies get a little bit creative with it, being like, "Hey, there's a stipend that we want to give to every single employee to support whatever they want to support,
Right.
and you can post about it, you can not post about it, you can do whatever you want to do, but this is your stipend, and we really, kind of encourage you to get involved in whatever capacity it might be." And some people, go to a local shelter, an animal shelter, and they get involved that way. Some people
Mhm.
get involved in missions, and I know in New York, especially on my street, there's several opportunities. Companies coming in and out, doing wonderful food drives here, and there's so many different ways to get involved, and where companies don't necessarily have to be the one saying, this is where we stand. It's, this is where you stand, and we support that by literally financially and giving you the
Right.
time off in order to contribute. But I haven't ever seen a situation where everyone's happy. We've
No.
checked all the boxes. It's really complicated.
So complicated. And actually, I completely agree with this approach that, if the key is that people want, or really the challenge we're solving for is that people want to feel more connected to work, to the people around them, to the bigger picture, whatever that
Mm-hmm.
means for them, where work sits in their lives, etc. And when you pick one way or another in the way in which you as an organization are going to share your beliefs, thinking that you are supporting your employees, you do run the risk of alienating other employees, because we can't just assume that everyone shares the same beliefs. I mean, that's exactly part of the problem and why we have to do DE&I training. People are different, and we have to understand and respect and appreciate those differences. And so one of the things that in my past, actually Target, I think, did a really good job of this, is that you were able to volunteer and have those hours accrued, and you were able to, win things. Yeah, it was like a bucket of fun. Yeah, it was amazing. And when I look back on that, I think about how I was able to give back time in places that meant a lot to me, and being able to take the time for that, not having to use PTO, being able to have company sponsored volunteer events, so you're able to do things together as well for really meaningful organizations that everyone can get behind. That to me is one of the best ways that companies can avoid getting into that messy area, while also saying we care. We care about all of these issues, but most importantly, we care about you, and we want you to feel supported and appreciated and connected, because these are the things that matter to you. And I know, I can only speak for myself at this point, but I would so much more appreciate that approach, I think, than a company saying that they believe X, Y, or Z and potentially feeling alienated myself or
Mhm.
underrepresented myself. And I'm sure that there are people who fall on both sides of that line. But I think we'll continue to see more of this, like almost a decentralized approach to DE&I, or like a decentralized approach to like socio-political issues. How do we not alienate Russian employees, Ukrainian employees, and also support them at the same time?
100%. I think as issues keep arising, and that's the world that we live in, right? There will always be something to have a conversation on, and I think that's so important is to have that conversation. But to your point, I love that example that you provided with Target. I think that there are ways that companies can support without necessarily making people feel like they're not a part of this or their opinions not included.
Right, right. So, just to kind of pivot a little bit, because I have my own selfish question here, because I am in a tech company, and
Yeah.
you talked a lot about distributed teams, and selfishly, this is a challenge that I'm presented with in my own company because we are everywhere, all over the globe, and all over the United States, and we're fully remote, and a lot of people, of course, are in this same situation, whether they are in HR roles or not, they could be employees as part of these distributed teams. So when you look at or you think about these companies that do have these teams, throughout different time zones and regions, how can employers today bring those people together virtually in a way that is meaningful? Because you're not always going to be able to pull people together in person. It's a very costly endeavor, especially if you are
Yeah.
that distributed. So, what are some things that people can do?
Sure. So there's several ways to kind of skin this cat. So let's talk about a couple. Ways that we've seen our customers do this with global employees is either there is something quarterly or monthly, depending on the cadence that everyone wants to get involved as well. I think that's really important. Anytime someone feels like, oh, it's the company thing, I'm forced to get online and do it, there's already like no,
Yeah.
just no.
Yeah.
That's a bad experience. Let's move away from that. So find the cadence that works really well, and perhaps there is that one all hands on, event that takes place, whether it be trivia, whether it be a virtual scavenger hunt, whether it be fun karaoke, you kind of name it. There's so many really fun virtual team building events that are specifically non-work related that can bring everyone together. And that can be something that's done, like I mentioned, quarterly or monthly. Then it's really important to have the teams in different parts of the globe get together locally. When I say get together, it can still be virtual, but there still needs to be that connection with like the boots on the ground, who's in your area, who's in your time zone,
Right.
who's within 3 hours or 5 hours of your time zone. And it's still important to give a budget and support to those types of initiatives too, where it's like, hey, we either wanted to do something in person, so we all grabbed drinks, and did something there, or we wanted to do something virtual. We did a virtual happy hour, and we had drinks sent to us, and we did a cocktail tasting class, something like that, where it's balancing the everyone getting together at once, at a regular cadence, and teams based on their geographical location doing something that's on their own initiative. So something that I will comment on this is that for everyone listening, if you're in the role or position at your company where you feel responsible for coordinating all of these events and experiences and the insurmountable pressure to get this right, get the timing right, make sure that people enjoy it and have a good time, make sure that people actually show up, I hear you and I totally get it. But if you're coordinating the monthly or quarterly get together where it's everyone there, give other people the power to coordinate their more local experiences. It takes the heavy lifting off of your shoulders, if you will, and also gives them the power and reminds individuals that they're also contributing to the culture and a sense of
Mm-hmm.
cohesiveness at work. So we have a round robin system that we really like our customers to kind of implement, where it's like, here's the culture club or the culture team, and it round robins around individuals to kind of create something fun or do something fun each month, each quarter, whatever that cadence might be. And it takes all of that pressure off it being just like a you thing and it being a company thing. Vote. What do you want to do? To run a poll. What are you excited about? How are we going to get everyone together and do something really fun that everyone enjoys? On that note, I will wrap up with the comment of as I mentioned in the beginning, this will feel still like it's something to do with work, and it is still something to do with work. So the timing is really important. If you do this at 5 p.m., and I know you can never coordinate 5 p.m. for every single time zone, but I'm
Right.
giving like East Coast time zone, 5 p.m. is already cutting into kids' time,
Yeah.
into, people coming home from work time, into just all of these other responsibilities. We've noticed the most success with these types of team events is if they take place at like 2 or 3 p.m.
Hmm.
and people can just get involved. It's 30, 45 minutes max. And then you can carry on with either the meetings that you have for the rest of the day, or it's a bit of a shorter day that day because, you've had a drink or two and you're feeling very merry. Like, it's a really nice balance of finding that time and also the length of the experience. We found that real sweet spot, 30, 45 minutes, and either like mid-morning or mid-afternoon.
I love that. This is making me really think about just everything. I mean, it's really good feedback and really good advice, and also really good data points, because I think so often we're probably just trying to throw a dart in the dark, but you have this information. It's what you do, and this is the beauty of leaders, HR and non-HR, to really, stop reinventing the wheel and think about what's already out there and the people who've already done the work, right? And you're right, the coordination is really usually the most work, and then the other part of the work is getting people to join and to go. But I think what's interesting, and I just recently had a discussion with a leader on this, and this is my last point before I pass it back to you to close us out, but which is that there are these multi-pronged approaches, and there's always going to be this feeling of like, well, if people are feeling burnt out, like, is this going to add to their burnout? But actually, the reality is that if you can get someone to just go, and maybe they have a lot going on, but you just say, listen, let's like unburden you a little bit. Let's move around some meetings. I'm happy to support. Maybe you have too many meetings. This is often part of the problem, but just go, see if you like it. And most of the time, people are going to enjoy that they spent time doing something with coworkers that didn't actually have anything to do with the work, but really made them feel more connected. And so if you listening are someone who is often the person that says, I don't want to go to things, just go. Just go to, who cares? It's company sponsored. Just take advantage of it, however you want to look at it, whether it's, an opportunity to socialize or an opportunity for a free drink or free food or whatever it is. Just go. Just go. That's what I say,
Totally.
right? Take advantage.
Totally.
But with that, thank you so much, Sammy. I'd love to just pass it back to you to tell us and tell the listeners where they can connect with you, where they can learn more about TenSpot, and maybe even learn more about, what they can do with their own companies by connecting.
Yeah, absolutely. So one, we have a website, tenspot.com. That's TenSpot.com. You can find us on LinkedIn, TenSpot on LinkedIn, and also connect with me on LinkedIn, Sammy Courtright. I post a lot of stuff, based on a lot of the data that we're covering that we've discussed not only today, but also we're doing continuous interviews and surveys and polls to understand what is really making teams click. How can we best support leaders when they're all dealing with the same issues around connectivity and engagement. If you want to send me an email directly, I would love that. My email is sammy@tenspot.com.
Amazing. Well, Sammy, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure having you on the podcast. I continue to love chatting with you, and I'm sure our paths will continue to cross.
Oh, I hope so. We'll make it happen.
Yes, we'll make it happen. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.